Okay, before we export to IFC, let's do a review of the data prior to the export. So other than the obvious schedules that we have been working on, the Kobe component and the Kobe type properties, like so, which I have already populated through an Excel spreadsheet that I have filled up with information about the type description and the asset type. And you can use this as an example. We'll make sure we bring that onto the discussion forum. Other than these obvious tools that are good for keeping a record of what the data are, it's important for you to be able to identify those elements directly on the fly as you work through the elements. For that, we have one main tool, which is the IFC Project Manager, which we have used plenty of times in this course, right there. But sometimes it could be more agile simply to grab things on the fly and then fix it as we go. For that, we can use the combination of find and select with saved criteria and the edit selection set tool. So let's go one more time, use the find and select tool. But then this time, let's create some criteria for us to reuse later on. So what we're after is we're gonna select all the 3D elements, and we're after the properties that apply only for Kobe. So let's go into Kobe, either types or components or spaces. Let's say we go for components first. And then you can bring one or several of them. Let's say we bring these 3, for instance. And what we need to know is when these elements are not undefined. So those are going to be the elements that have some value within the property. Now, whether the value is default or not, that will be these 2 options in here. So it really depends on how do you want to check it. For instance, this check will select those elements that do have values, whatever the value is. So if you click on plus, you'll see that it is actually selecting the elements, walls, columns, slabs, and beams, because those are the ones that have applied the property and the mapping through the translator. Now, none of the other ones have any values in them, so that's why it's not being selected. Now, let's say we can save this for basic criteria, and we call it select Kobe type parameters with values, or just leave it like that. And click on store. So you can always go back to that if needed. Now, assume we want to check whether one of those values are not the default value. That is, when the element has a value, but it's been applied a custom value. Like what we did with the Kobe properties and adding these 2 additional type description and asset type. So let's go and check. Back in the find and select tool by removing those 2 criteria, or 3 criteria actually. And let's add the Kobe type parameter. Asset type. And let's say type description. And instead of using that contains and then a value, which you could check if you were going to be fairly strict, let's use just has default value or has custom value. So I'm actually want to check if they have a custom value. And I'm going to click on plus. And now it selects the same number because I did apply that parameter to all of them. So these, you could save it as select Kobe type custom. And then we can go back and forth in between these different criteria types just to check things on the fly. Now, the beauty of this system is that it's dynamic, meaning that it's not creating a list that it needs to be refreshed later on. The selection is pretty quick, and the tool allows you to make a change in bulk by using the edit selection set tool. And then from here, you can as well just go down to the Kobe type parameters or component parameters, depending on the one you're actually looking for. And of course, I'm not going to damage that right now, and then apply a value directly through this. This particular setting is very good when you're trying to pick up an element that has deviated from a mapping in your ArchiCAD properties. What do I mean? Remember that our ArchiCAD properties can be filled up with formulas, like the Zigurat classification using a string or the block or the tab ID. But the moment you type in that value on the element, the connection is lost and the expression no longer functions because it's been replaced by a custom value. So the default value for these specific properties is the expression. So if you have a value, let's say something like block, that has an expression because it's picking up the project number from project info, which is a global parameter. If you want to check if there's an element that for whatever reason, by mistake, you or someone else has changed, you can use the find and select criteria and check for that. So let's say we now, let's get rid of this. Remove and remove. And now that we have no values there, let's build up a find a select criteria that picks up let's say the Zigurat block, and click on add. In this case, I'm going to go for finding the elements that have a custom value. And prior to recording this video, I had set one of the elements in the model to a custom value, but it's really hard to find if you just look at the model and sometimes even if you look at a schedule. So an easier way to find that is simply building a criteria set like this and click on plus, and then our ArchiCAD will select that wall up there. Let's double check. I'm going to use Control-Shift-T to jump straight into the edit selection set, which is going to allow me to go and check the values. So now if I go all the way here to the Zigurat block, you'll see that this says M5, which is not correct because project info states that the project number, which is what we're using for that value to populate that value, is meant to be M7. So what we do in those cases, you can find the elements, you can check with the values with the edit selection set. And if you want to revert that to read from the formula, all you need to do really is connect with the left-hand button right here and say, use the default value, which is an expression. And now you know that is a formula. So click on OK. And now that should be then displaying M7 right there. If we use our selection criteria again, there should be no element selected when we ask for that specific criteria. Other than this, you can use a similar criteria just to build a graphic override. So let's use one for the Kobe parameters. Just go down here to the graphic overrides as we did before. Let's create a new one and simply call it Kobe and properties. Then add a new rule, which I'm going to call Kobe type properties. And this rule then is going to go and select all the 3D elements where, and this is where you add the multiple criteria, where the Kobe type parameters, let's add all of them. And this may take some time depending on how many parameters do we have. You will say has default value if what you're aiming for is highlighting the elements that have not been modified and stay as non-applicable, or has custom value if you're aiming to just select or highlight the elements that do have a change value, so that is a custom value to it. So I'm going to actually go for that, has custom value, and I'm going to select all of that for all of this. And actually, let's keep it with just has custom value for the first two, since we haven't changed any of the values to the other ones. So let's say we are responsible for the two first properties, and we're just going to check those. So I'm going to go to the override style, and now you need to give it some sort of an override. Let's say we're going to color those to a bluish color, something like that. Everything that is blue is because it complies with my checking criteria, which is for type description and asset type to have a custom value. I'm going to click on OK. And now I'm going to add a new rule just to make all white or transparent. And that rule essentially will simply make all the 3D elements of a white color or grayish, like so, and about 50% or 60% transparent. And then the combination of those will take over the coloring of the model and then highlighting the elements that are complying to that rule, like so. So as expected, we knew those values were there, and if they were going wrong or not having completely the same values, you will be able to pick it up rather easily just by looking at the model. So I believe we're ready to export. So before we go, let's just add one more thing that is going to be useful for the sake of the COBie export. Our model contains mostly building elements. So those are going to be construction assets, elements that you can't really move, but we don't have any furniture types. So all I'm going to do now is I'm just going to place a single piece of furniture up in the level 9 up here. So let's go into that area. Let's say somewhere on there. And let's go and place with the object tool. Let's double click on it. And let's type up here, credenza. Just gonna place a piece of furniture like so on the layer furniture, which is turn it on. And I'm simply just gonna place that. Let's check the classification. It is classified as furniture. Let's classify that as a uniclass type and type in furniture. And let's use freestanding furniture systems. Let's choose that. Let's go and check quickly the categories. So this is clearly a non-undefined as load bearing, and it's an interior element. And if you like, you could populate the COBie parameters, which is not necessary really. So we won't do it right now. And we're going to click on OK. I'm going to change the geometry method just to make sure that I can rotate it. And I'm going to place it around here. And let's say in that direction. Like so. Rotate that once again. And that should be fine. This is just going to be a test for the IFC export. Okay, let's close this and go back to our general 3D view. And then I'll see you in the next video to test the export to IFC.